Welcome back to Better Than a Pill. Today, I'm so excited to have Kathryn Berg on as a guest. And Kathryn Berg is the owner of Lotus Homeopathy Incorporated, and she is a certified classical homeopath, and she specializes in working with PTSD. And today, we're going to be talking about solutions for trauma and PTSD. So, welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me, Carrie.
I'm happy to have you here. I'm so excited to get started. And I thought I would start off by asking you why you chose to specialize in PTSD.
Well, it was actually based on something that someone told me many years ago. And it was, what kind of thing would you find unbearable if there was no solution for? And I thought about all of the military people who, have given up well, I don't want to say their freedom, but they've given up their time. They've lived away from their families. They've gone abroad. They've sacrificed a lot, and then they come back and they can't live a life. And to me, that was unacceptable. And then, of course, there are, obviously lots of civilians and first responders who also suffer from chronic trauma.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, there's a huge need for that. And, I think even taking it a step back, I mean, how is it defined? Like, what is trauma? Is it the same as PTSD? What is the definition?
Okay, well, trauma isn't the same as PTSD because trauma does not always turn into PTSD, but you need trauma to have PTSD. I mean, a traumatic event can be a car accident, right?
Mhm.
But if, let's say you run off the road and your children are in the car with you, but it makes you feel strong to go and rescue them. You're probably not going to develop PTSD. But if your sensation and emotions that come from that accident are, oh my God, I could have died, that's more likely to turn into PTSD. Because a lot of it is, how do we respond to the event as opposed to what actually happened.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's so good to clarify, especially for everybody listening today, because I think those terms are often used and not really understood. So that makes sense what you just said. And so somebody can have a trauma, but they can recover from the trauma. Are there side effects to trauma, just like PTSD, or how does that work?
Um, Side effects. Well, there are certainly, I don't know if I'd call them side effects, but certainly there is a cause and effect relationship
Mhm.
between those kinds of things. So one of the easiest traumatic events to help people get over is one of these near accident things. I mean, we've all either been in them or seen them where someone almost hits you and you panic and you pull over and you breathe and okay, and then you're, forever feeling like you can't drive, so that's trauma. Maybe you end up with heart palpitations or something like that every time you get in and drive. So that's all part of the trauma. I wouldn't call it a side effect, but it's all part of the trauma.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it's like if somebody was in a car accident and they were hit on the side. I'm even thinking about myself. When I get into the car now, I'm always like on guard, like that somebody's going to hit me. But that's just what happens after the trauma. That's not PTSD, right?
Well, I'm not allowed to diagnose people.
Okay.
So because I
Well, I
am
don't want you
not
to
a
diagnose me.
licensed physician.
No,
So,
but I'm just trying to get a general sense, and just for our audience to get a general sense. It
sure.
sounds like there's a distinguishing factor between the two, right?
Well, I think how does it affect your life on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so let's get into that a little more to help everybody understand. Um, what are the symptoms? Let's go with that. What are the symptoms of PTSD?
Well, there are a lot of them. It's, are you, the fear, obviously, that something else could happen. It can be dreams, you know, um, obviously with the military PTSD, we hear a lot about dreams that they're still in combat and, reliving whatever it was that happened. Just hypervigilance. I actually have a PTSD questionnaire that if people really wanted to know what the symptoms were and if they had it, they can go online and they can take that and they'll get feedback on whether they have it or not. Because it's based on something that was created by the Anxiety and Depression Association and the DSM-5. So it's and then I tweaked it a little bit more for my own use. And so if people really want to know if they have it, they could take that quiz.
Certainly they could, and we will definitely include your website in the link of the episode, for people that may be interested if they do have it. But just getting back to like some of the symptoms, it sounds like the symptoms that you're sharing are fear, dreams. What else?
Grief can be a symptom.
Okay.
And as I said, hypervigilance. You walk into a room and you're looking around. You're looking for an exit. This is very common in military folks, even if they don't have PTSD, because honestly, they're trained to do that, to make sure that they're looking around so that they don't get ambushed. But, it becomes PTSD when you feel like everywhere you go, you might get ambushed.
Okay. And so somebody that's had that experience, being in the military or war or something is going to feel like that. And somebody else that is experiencing PTSD that hasn't been in war, it can also feel that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially if your trauma included, some sort of physical abuse.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So the symptoms with fear and hypervigilance, explain that a little bit more, what you mean, because we all have fear.
Right. Fear for your safety.
Okay.
So let's say you're getting up and giving a speech. You might be fearful, but you're probably not afraid that something would happen to you physically.
Okay.
So I think that in homeopathy, we have, if I were to look up the word fear, there's probably 10,000 symptoms. And so, fear can want to run a very wide range, but I think it's, fear for your safety, that something could happen to you physically.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the kind of fear. And if somebody has the PTSD and they have that fear for safety, does normal fear that they have get exacerbated? Like, or is it, how does that work?
Well, I think that it just depends on how closely their other fears are related to the PTSD trauma fear.
I see. Interesting. And then I've never heard the term hypervigilance. Is that what does that mean?
You're looking around.
That's the looking around part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're checking around to make sure that that something's not going to happen to you. So you could be taking your dog out for a walk and you're hypervigilant because, something had happened to you when you were out one time.
Wow.
Thing like that. Yeah. Some other symptoms include just having a very negative attitude about life, that nothing will get better. That's also a pretty common symptom.
Wow. Yeah. So we've got grief, negativity, hypervigilance.
Yeah.
This a really heavy fear of safety is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. And so through your experience in working with people with PTSD over the years, what have you noticed, I guess, are the biggest struggles that they may be experiencing with?
The biggest struggles that they're experiencing?
Yeah.
Living life. Some people, they drink to self-medicate. Some people eat to self-medicate. Some people just stay home to make their life safer. Some people are angry all the time. And they want people, but they end up pushing them away, because of their behaviors. that they can't help.
So the anger is then often another side effect of the PTSD.
Yes, it's a symptom of PTSD for sure. And some of the most common remedies for PTSD are remedies that have suppressed anger as part of their remedy picture. And we use them for people who don't have PTSD also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, what about some of the myths that that go along with PTSD?
Oh, well, the biggest one is that you can't be cured.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good.
That's the biggest one, is that
Mhm.
you're going to be like that for the rest of your life, or I have to manage my symptoms my whole life, that they'll never go away. It's another way to look at it, because some people think management is a cure. Another myth is that you have to go through, like some treatment modalities have you relive the event over and over again. And it can be very traumatic for people to go through that. And with homeopathy, we don't ask them to do that. I'm more interested in not what happened, but how they responded to it. That's how I find a remedy, is how did they.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay.
I did, in fact, a little poll. And you know how you can do a poll on social media.
Yeah.
And they aren't scientific by any stretch of the imagination. But I put some polls out in PTSD groups that I'm a member of on Facebook. And it was about every single place was about 50-50 that people thought that they could or could not get cured from their PTSD or heal from it or recover from it. Yeah, it
Wow.
was about 50-50 on every one of them.
Hmm. Hmm. And so you are living proof, though, in your experience, that that there is a cure, that there is a solution, and that's why we're here. And you've been doing this for some time, so you have some experiences to share. Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do. So you
Yeah.
want me to share a few stories?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's hear a
All
few.
right.
Okay.
All right. So I did a study back in 2019, and I treated my clients at no charge. They had to pay for their remedies, but otherwise there was no charge. And I worked with about 15 people. So I got a lot of information. I gathered and learned a lot of information from those folks. And so one of my military folks was in a situation where, for 3 days they kept getting attacked over in Afghanistan, and that's enough to turn anybody, into a person with PTSD. And he
Sure.
was having dreams probably 3 nights a week. And so I gave him a remedy that matched his fear of death. And he went from that to not having any dreams,
Wow.
PTSD dreams. Yes, within a month, he went to that. The dreams were gone. So,
And
yeah.
that's and when we're talking about your solution, which it sounds like is the homeopathy
Yes, a
natural.
homeopathic remedy that matched his symptoms.
Yes. So wow. And for people that are new to that term, what does that mean?
Homeopathic.
Homeopathy. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
hear. Yeah.
All right. So homeopathy, it means similar suffering. Homeo meaning similar, pathy meaning suffering. So it means similar suffering. So it was developed by Dr. Samuel Hahnemann in the late 17 and early 1800s in Germany. And he stumbled upon this concept when he was translating medical textbooks. So he was disgusted by the medical practices of the time. And so rather than treating patients, he translated medical textbooks, and he knew, 6, 7, 8 languages. And so he was the perfect person to do it. And one of the things that he found in a medical textbook was that the reason that quinine was so effective in treating malaria was that it was so bitter. And that's the way they used to look at things back then. And being a scientist and also a chemist, he knew more substances than substances other than quinine that were more bitter than quinine, and they didn't touch malaria. So he said that can't be what's causing them to heal from the quinine. So curiosity getting the better of him, he took a dose of quinine just to see what would happen. And what happened was he developed the symptoms of malaria. He didn't develop malaria. He developed the symptoms of malaria. You have to have the protozoa to actually have malaria, right?
Mhm.
And so he stumbled upon things that Hippocrates and Paracelsus and other great thinkers that came before him had said that like cures like. And so he figured out a way to take some of these substances and make them safe and effective without causing the side effects that they have. And so quinine is still used to treat malaria, by the way, in Western medicine. And but we can also use it in a homeopathic dose, which means it goes through a process called potentizing. And that's what he spent his life figuring out. And so then what you do to figure out what the remedies are going to cure is you give them to healthy people. You know, in Western medicine, when they try out a medication, they give them to sick people. But in homeopathy, we give it to healthy people, and it causes a certain set of temporary symptoms in them. And then we know if somebody walks in to your office with those symptoms, it will cure those symptoms.
Okay.
And we get very specific about them, you know. I mean, it isn't just in my fear I'm going to die. What else is along with it, you know? So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a natural remedy that can consist of different things, different herbs or whatever.
Plants, minerals, or animals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so in this example, you created this remedy and the man was healed.
Well, I bought the remedy. I don't have a pharmacy where I
Okay.
create.
Fair
But
enough.
yes, I
Gotcha.
got it from a homeopathic pharmacy. And he
Great.
took the remedy every couple of weeks. And once it kind of, I also bumped him up a little bit to a little bit stronger dose as well. And he doesn't have the dreams anymore. And I actually have checked in with him. And
Oh,
he still doesn't. And that was in 2019.
that's great. And so that's all he did. He didn't have any other form of treatment. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Share another one. Let's hear another one.
All right. Well, I have had clients who have grown up in cults,
Mhm.
which, as you can imagine, is very
Yeah.
traumatic, and have, you know, changed their lives around to be able to not have this fear and anxiety all the time. I had a client who was an EMT, and as she explained to me, when you are a first responder, and this is true with police officers and EMTs and ER docs, when you see them, it's almost always the worst day of their life. You know, nobody calls the ambulance because it's the best day of their life, unless they're having a baby, right?
Right.
That would be the only reason I can think of. So, you know, it's just one of those chronic things that just builds up and builds up. And we hear about police officers and, you know, other first responders taking their lives because they just can't handle all of that.
Mhm.
And so I gave her she used to self-medicate by drinking a bottle of wine a day. That's how she managed it. And her story, by the way, is on my website, so people can go out and listen to it.
Great.
So, but she was, you know, everything just changed completely for her. She wasn't angry anymore. She was not doesn't even think about those things anymore. She also is not an EMT anymore, by the way. She had quit before I even worked with her, but she still had all the symptoms. So that was
That's
a
amazing.
really interesting experiment. And she's living a very successful life now.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's amazing that this is a solution, which is why we're here today, because obviously it's working for people. And there may be somebody listening today that this could be a solution that is struggling with PTSD, maybe tried other things, but knowing that homeopathy can be a valid way to cure it. I mean, that's pretty incredible, you
Yes,
know?
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my another story is there was a woman who was about 60 years old, at the time of the study, and she had lived a life of a lot of trauma, just kind of a bad upbringing. And people will call that CPTSD, which is chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome, or dysfunction, or it is sometimes called complicated, but CPTSD. And I kind of look at it as people who probably grew up in a dysfunctional family, didn't perhaps have the best parents in the world. And so, and parents obviously do the best they can. And so I don't want to push everything on parents. But it's a little tougher to treat those kinds of cases because they've gone on for so long. The more chronic PTSD, where they've had multiple traumas their entire life. So, and they might be different ones as well, from each other. Whereas with a first responder, things are going to be pretty similar.
Right.
Each time it happens. So, so I gave her a remedy, and she was just in so much a better mood, just much better. And then sometime in the middle of the 4 months, that's how long people got for their treatment when I did my study. Sometime in the middle of there, an anniversary arose. And it was the anniversary of the death of one of her mentors. And she was just having a lot of grief and a lot of trauma over it. How could this person leave? All of these things. And anniversary deaths are so interesting. I was just in the middle of writing a blog about that. And so we changed her remedy to deal with that long time grief that she'd held on to for so long. And so she was taking that remedy for about a month. And then kind of her old symptoms that I had first treated her for came back. So we switched her back to the other remedy. And it was then once again an appropriate remedy for her. So, and she says, I don't have CPTSD anymore. And one of the other observations she had made was she had tried a lot of different things, mental, emotional, spiritual kinds of things. And she said that they worked better after the homeopathy, that the homeopathy helped clear some of that stuff out that enabled the other things she had tried to work better.
Okay. So that's actually, that makes sense. So it can be both, and it can be, you have client, obviously she's getting help in other ways, but the homeopathy just accelerated her progress. It sounds like she was able to.
Yeah. She would try the other things and they'd work for a while and then they wouldn't.
Right.
Yes.
And do you see that a lot, or do you see people just doing the homeopathy, or do you see a mix in this situation? What's common for you?
Okay. Well, I don't know if there's a common, but for military folks, for example, they might be on medications because that is how the VA treats them.
Okay.
Yeah. And they might also be doing the EMDR and some of the other mental health exercises that people use. And so I can't tell somebody to stop a medication, but they can make that decision on their own, and we can work together with their doctor. And I've had people definitely get off of their medications when they don't need them anymore. Some people just stop them on their own. Can't help that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, it's a little easier to work with military or first responders or veterans than it is somebody with, as you described, more of a chronic PTSD or from dysfunctional families. And you're okay.
Right. Yes, there are fewer remedies to choose from. And so that makes it easier.
Okay.
There's probably 1,000 remedies to choose from if you've had a dysfunctional family.
Sure. Whereas it's easier for you, and you actually see the client benefiting more rapidly, it sounds like, with okay. Well, that makes sense. And is the majority of your work focused more on first responders and that veteran population, would you say?
I would say it's more focused on veterans and civilians and less on first responders, mostly because I just haven't been able to um, reach out and get, there's just so many more resources for the veterans. And
Mhm.
they're more willing to talk about it. And it's just more difficult to find the other people.
I
I think that's
see.
it.
And yeah,
The
and
first responders. Yes.
it's harder to find the first responders. You're not getting as many of them, but you have. But it sounds like there, if I'm hearing correctly, crossover between the treatment for first responder and veteran, and that's kind of an easier thing for you to treat with homeopathy.
Yes, the
Yeah.
crossover
Okay.
is, yeah, there are
Okay.
definitely remedies that cross over. And of course, a lot of military become first responders too.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
They become police officers. That's very common once they retire from the military.
Now, did you have experience in the military or any
No.
family members? So you
Oh,
just
I
something
have
that,
a niece right now who is in the military,
okay.
but otherwise, no.
Just that's
It was
amazing though.
just,
This, yeah,
yeah, it was just as I
natural.
said earlier, it was something I couldn't tolerate not being able to be fixed. So,
Great, Karen. That's so good. I'm so glad you're doing your work, and this has been really eye-opening to learn about homeopathy as a possible solution and to understand it a little bit more because we hear a lot about natural medicine, and this is another natural way to go
yes.
about helping people. And I love your focus. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yes, thank you for
And
having me.
yes, and I just for everybody listening, will have Kathryn's website in this episode. And as she mentioned, there is the PTSD checklist and questionnaire on
Mhm.
there, and I'm sure a lot of other things. So um, feel free to click on that link and get in contact with her. And people can reach you directly on the website too, Kathryn.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
there's a way to reach them directly on the website. And if they fill out the PTSD questionnaire, it actually comes to me and I can reach back out to them if they so desire. If they don't want to, they can put that in there too. I was just
Okay.
curious, please don't call me, that kind of thing. So
Absolutely. Okay.
I
Thank you for
respect that sometimes people just need to think about it for a while. So,
Great. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. And remember, we do new episodes every week on Wednesday, and I look forward to having you join me then.